operators community this problem that we have with the routing system. And this is my first time in Ghana, but thankfully that's not my first engagement with the African network operators community. I was happy to feel this energy coming from this community, so that's very good. I'm very happy to be here. I'll be talking today about the routing system and issues we have, and how can we improve? What are the opportunities lying in front of us? How can we make the system more robust and resilient? And in this presentation, I'll be focusing mostly on industry-led initiative called Mutually Agreed Norms for Routing Security, or MANRS, started 11 years ago by the Internet Society, and now it's being run by Global Cyber Alliance, and I follow the same path. I worked for the Internet Society before, and then I moved to the Global Cyber Alliance to continue this work. So, thank you very much for your attention. Let's move to another slide. Should I point at something? Where should I point this at? Yeah, I'm trying. Oh, okay. Thank you. So this is how routing system, or the interconnection system, looks today, or rather how it looked. It was generated back in 2020 by the researcher SCADA. And you see how well interconnected the system is. So we have about 78,000 autonomous systems operating on the internet. We have more than 1 million destinations or prefixes announced in the routing system. And the whole system is underpinned by a protocol called BGP, as you all know, using this every day. And this well-interconnected system has one vulnerability. Okay. All right. It's the BGP itself. Because the BGP was developed last century, 30 years ago, and it was focused on performance and scalability. And those two features, they still the foundational for the performance of the internet. The same BGP, with very little modification since that time, continues to operate and offer performance of today's internet, which is orders of magnitude bigger. But at the same time, it misses some security controls. The protocol itself doesn't have built-in abilities to distinguish, to validate the announcements. And therefore, well, in the past, people relied on trust. Why would my peer announce a destination that it cannot deliver, right? Or destination it doesn't have, it doesn't operate. But as time went by, people had to implement some additional controls outside the BGP to control the policy, a routing policy, how this routing policy is implemented by other networks. But it's still a problem. Still, the routing system is pretty fragile, and it's not only fragile to sophisticated attacks, it is very fragile for misconfigurations. So a simple misconfiguration by one network can inflict pain on hundreds, if not thousands of other networks, can cause outages for big networks like Google or Verizon that will last for hours. All right. So yes, it's not theoretical. I mean, here in this table, I provide some incidents that hit the media headlines. But every day I show you, we observe incidents happening in the routing system. So there are two types of routing incidents, really. One is called misorigination. It's also called hijack. It's when a network announces prefixes that doesn't belong to it, doesn't operate. It pretends to operate this prefix, so impersonating the prefix. I mean, a very classic example of this you'll hear with YouTube hijack back in 2008 when Pakistan Telecom started announcing prefixes of YouTube for different reasons, but the internet believed, or half at least of the internet believed Pakistan Telecom, and therefore that caused a huge outage for YouTube at that time. But those attacks continued. I mean, only in June this year, several prefixes of root server operators were hijacked, which caused redirect to non-authoritative services for several hours. Route leak is a more subtle attack, which is a policy violation, right? It's when, well, typical example, when your customer, your BGP customer, starts announcing your some of the prefixes they learned from another transit provider, and therefore they're becoming your transit provider. Very damaging for both your customer in many cases and you as well as an operator, as a transit provider. But it can be used for more subtle attacks, because if you're not announcing like prefixes like Google, right, maybe a small prefix of a bank or some other important company which doesn't generate a lot of traffic, and it passes the traffic through you, and basically you can act in any place in the world, and you can hijack and pass through the traffic from any destination to any destination. That makes a perfect place for enabling man-in-the-middle attacks, or reconnaissance activities. You see what kind of traffic passing by. So very dangerous. And for completeness, we also provide anti-spoofing capabilities, because IP spoofing is the root source for amplification and reflection volumetric attacks, right? And although this is not per se a routing control, that's how routing works. Like in the postal system, the source address is not checked, right? The postal system will deliver on the destination address like your routers as well, only if something wrong is happening, or you need to respond. That's where this source address is used, and that's how volumetric and reflection attacks work. So we saw this interconnect system, and we knew about those problems for many decades. I mean, almost since the BGP was adopted, we realized, people realized, engineers realized the vulnerabilities of this protocol. And soon after the protocol was deployed, the first routing incident happened. So it's not news. And since then, many tools were provided. And since then, work was done to improve the protocol itself. But still, we're experiencing those incidents. I just mentioned to you, it was pretty easy to hijack root server operators' IP addresses. And many networks on the internet believe that. So how that's possible? Well, the thing is, if you look at those dots that I showed on the picture before, each networks operate independently. Each network has make to their own decisions how to protect themselves. But on another hand, if you protect yourself, if you implement routing security controls, it doesn't bring you so much protection. It benefits the overall system, but much less yourself. If you implement routing security controls, you can still be hijacked. If you implement anti-spoofing measures, you can still be a target of volumetric attack. So what's the incentive, right? On the other hand, if you wait and if you do nothing, but other networks improve their routing security, they will protect you. So in other words, your routing security is in the hands of other operators. That's what's called in social science and in our environment a collective action problem. We need to act together. It's a different concept. You can't build a firewall, you can't build protective perimeter, because your perimeter in this case is the whole internet. So how do we solve the collective action problem? In many cases, and when the problem is real on national level, regulators come into play, because they create a level playing field for parties, different parties. I'm not talking about, networking per se, in other areas as well. And they create requirements that everyone has to comply. This doesn't work in the internet. Well, because of the global span, because of it might cause fragmentation, because there is no, the coordination between the regulators will be probably even more challenging than coordination between network operators. So one of the promising approach is norm setting. You set the norm, which is acceptable behavior and non-acceptable behavior. And this is being adopted without sort of, disrespectful to national boundaries. It's real about the players in this particular field. So what is a norm? It's something that is widely accepted. It's not contentious. Norm cannot be contentious. It's not really a least not common denominator, because then it doesn't make any difference, but it's not also a sort of best current practice, because then not many can adopt this norm. And it's visible and measurable. So if you translate to any other environment, that's how the norm manifests themselves. You can say whether someone or another party adheres to the norm or not. If you can't say that, it's very hard to control and spread the norm around. And that's what MANRS, the mutually agreed norms for routing security, is based on. It's really a collaborative approach that focuses on those fixes. It helps operators to improve their own routing security, and also, not less importantly, contribute to the resilience and strengths and security of the global routing system. And it's based on two pillars. The first one, the norm itself. And this norm expressed by what we call actions. And the actions are minimum requirements that operators doing business on the internet have to implement. It's nothing unfeasible in implementing the MANRS norm, still not all of the operators implemented. And another important component here is that this norm, this commitment of the operators that adhere to MANRS is measured. It's not just declaration, like, oh, I think routing security is very important, here's my statement on that. No. We have a measurement framework that measures your compliance with MANRS requirements, and therefore this visibility, I talked about this on the previous slide, that's very important, essential for the norms. It is present here as well. Okay. Okay, right. So I mentioned MANRS actions, and the actions, they were first developed back in 2014 while at the Internet Society for the largest group of players in the routing security system, which is network operators. And that's what the program was called, Network Operators Program. But then there were other parties that were also contributing to routing security in the system. And we worked together with these parties, and they create their own requirements. The next one were IXPs, how Internet exchange points can help routing security. Well, many Internet exchange points have this facility called route servers, right? And implementing controls on this route server can really clean up the peering sort of routing issues. So IXPs have a unique role in securing routing. Then there is CDN and cloud providers, right? Everyone wants to peer with them, especially with big ones, and therefore they can use this peering power to impose some of the requirements to motivate their operators, their peers, to implement routing controls and join MANRS perhaps. And then last but not least, network operators, network equipment vendors, because if your equipment doesn't support necessary features, you probably can't implement them. So that's why one by one we launched together with the community, and by the community we launched those programs that now the backbone of the MANRS initiative. I apologize, the clicker doesn't work all the time. Just to give you information, some idea what those actions look like. Those are the 4 actions of the MANRS Network Operators Program, and the blue shading is the mandatory actions. So you have to prove when you join MANRS, you have to prove that you implement these things. And there is an auditing process that will look and ask questions, but also a measurement process, and I'll talk about this in a minute, that measures how well you implement those actions. The first one, very important that you implement filtering. It doesn't tell you how, it looks at the outcomes. So you prevent incorrect routing announcements. So we're not saying, well, implement RPTI or clean up IRR. Those are important things, and probably that's what is required to implement this action. But we say, hey, use whatever means you have at your disposal to prevent incorrect routing announcements coming from your customers. Well, the same applies to other actions, that's just one example. IXPs, I mentioned IXPs, and I mentioned their unique role in this interconnection infrastructure. So again, filtering is a very important action. And we had a long discussion with the IXP community when this program was introduced, because they felt, well, is it not too risky to drop incorrect announcements on the route server? We should be neutral, transparent. And finally, they agreed that this is very important, and that's a mandatory action. If you want to join MANRS, you have to ensure that your route server doesn't propagate, doesn't just tag, it just drops incorrect routing announcements at the routing server. So the peering system is clean from routing incidents. The MANRS community. I mean, community is very important. It's not just paperwork. It's the community that proves that those actions work, and it's growing communities that has gravity and motivates others to join. So we start with 9 operators joining the Network Operators Program. Now we are more than 1,200 different entities in these 4 programs that I mentioned. It's a steady growth. The biggest part, of course, the network operators, followed by IXPs. While the numbers, they indicate also the groups are smaller, right, than network operators. But MANRS continues to grow. I have to mention here that if you compare these numbers with the numbers I provide on the first slide when I was talking about routing system, when I said there are about 77,000 autonomous systems, and now we have 1,200. That's a big difference, but you don't have to secure all the networks. Each network that implements MANRS, it protects itself, but also it serves as a guardian, preventing, to a certain extent, propagation of incorrect routing announcements. So it takes only so many, and the system will be already very secure. You don't need to secure 100% of all networks to make the routing system robust and resilient. It's a global effort. So dots here, they show MANRS participants in different countries, and the size of the dot depicts the number of participants in the country. If you look at African continent, very good participation from the IXP side. We have 14 IXPs that are part of the MANRS IXP program. I would say it could be better from the network operator side. And I hope my presentation today can inspire you to look at this effort once again and put your controls in order and try to join this initiative. Measuring MANRS. Well, as I said, without measurements, it's all wishy-washy. I mean, what do you implement? How you implement this? And measurement provide a factual basis where you can say, yes, those networks are really demonstrating a commitment to routing security, and those networks do not. And to do this, we implemented what we call the MANRS Observatory. You can see the URL here, well, on the previous slide, and you can visit the MANRS Observatory. And as a casual user, you can see the state of routing security, and you can look at the routing security on a country level or on regional level, but MANRS participants, they have access to more detailed data. What was very important for creating this system, that it was transparent. We have a measurement framework, and you can look, and we use open data sources. So in principle, you can reproduce the MANRS observatory, you can create the same measurements. You don't need to trust the MANRS observatory to measure network performance. It's passive. As much as possible, we use passive measurements, which allows us not only measure participating networks that require cooperation, but also all networks on the internet, and therefore compare how MANRS networks perform compared to others. And it's evolving, so we always look what needs to change if we change the actions, how that affects the measurement system and what needs to be changed there. That's a landing page of the observatory. It gives you a state of routing security from the MANRS perspective. I mean, it's slightly different because MANRS is, you can see this as a compliance effort, right? You measure compliance. But those metrics, they are characteristic from of the state of routing security on the internet. Now, here, those data I provide for the African region, right? So you can see African networks here. And you can get a more detailed info. Well, you can look at the history, and well, at least for the last year, you can see a decrease in routing incidents. And that's not only in Africa, you can see this globally, and hopefully that's the result of deploying more routing security controls. And we'd like to think that MANRS contributed to this positive trend. You don't see a lot of trend, but that's mostly because of the graphs. I'll show a more detailed picture, but there is a good progress on IRR and RPKI side. And those information, those repositories need to be populated and maintained in order to operators to implement routing security controls, as you probably know. As I mentioned, for the participants, a more detailed view of it. They can look at particular scores, right? And this color scheme, it actually depicts the MANRS compliant networks. That's the blue. It shows in amber aspiring, that you're in between. You can improve and become fully MANRS compliant. And red shows non-compliant or lagging networks that really need to put more effort into improving their situation. So 2,000 plus autonomous systems in Africa, in African region. That's the performance you can look. Participants themselves can look in more detailed info on their own autonomous system and see how those scores were calculated, what kind of incidents contributed to that score, and actually investigate those incidents as well. It's not a real-time monitoring tool, it's a compliance tool. As a participant, you will also get a monthly compliance report, but it helps you to improve and maintain your routing security in the long run. Okay, well, I picked RPKI adoption because RPKI is a hot topic, and looked how African networks are doing in this area. And I have to say, the African networks are not doing bad. I mean, a third of networks have implemented, have deployed RPKI. They have all the announcements registered in RPKI system with ROAS. I think the warning side is this 62%, they have zero RPKI deployment, they haven't even started. This, light red is 2%, they have started to register some of the routes, so they're on the wrong path, but 62% haven't even touched that point. That's a worrying side. Now, if you look at MANRS participants in the African region, those 72 networks, you can see the difference in performance, right? 2/3 have all the announcements fully registered in RPKI. Only 14% haven't touched that. You may say, well, they are not compliant, but in MANRS Action 4, it requires registrations. It doesn't require RPKI yet. We are thinking of reviewing that stuff and making RPKI mandatory, but at the moment, it says either you use IRR or you use RPKI. That's why you can't say that 14% non-compliant in this case. But I think that's a positive picture, and it also shows that I think MANRS stimulates this improvement. So please consider that. 11 years young, I think that's a long effort, right, for the internet. 11 years, well, I feel old myself when I look at this slide. But I think we as a community, let me click through. Okay, right. It's more than a decade of community action, and it's really community action. So I'm very proud to be part of this effort. And the community has accomplished a lot, from 9 operators to 1,200, from 1 program to 4 programs, from just some interesting project to a renowned effort that is recognized also by the governments, by policymakers. It's objective. We track the development by the MANRS Observatory. It's not just a table where you submit and get a tick. And we start publishing the scores on the main MANRS website, so you can look how MANRS participants are actually performing. For some, that might even create negative publicity, and therefore that's an extra motivation to improve. This year, we introduced the MANRS development process, so now it's fully transparent how the MANRS documents are developed and how they are maintained. You can see how community contributed to the development of those documents, so it's not like, well, something is falling off the sky. Although all the documents that you see now in the MANRS programs, they were developed by the community working groups. In 2014, the effort has been started, and 10 years later, Internet Society transferred operation responsibility as part of the partnership agreement to the Global Cyber Alliance, as I mentioned. And I was part of the start of this effort at the Internet Society and moved naturally to Global Cyber Alliance to continue working on it. Shameless plug on Global Cyber Alliance is a non-for-profit that looks at the infrastructural security, and it actually focuses on 3 areas. One is capacity building, and that's mainly concerned security of enterprises and end users. It also focuses on the overall health of non-for-profit acting in cybersecurity space. That's another collaborative cybersecurity program. And the one where MANRS resides is the internet integrity, that really focuses on the security of internet infrastructure, and in particular on DNS routing and unwanted traffic. So I think that's a very logical piece that was missing in GCA, which MANRS filled. I want to talk a little bit about the evolution, about those 11 years. Or as I mentioned, it started in 2014 with 9 network operators. You can see these names of these operators that launched the MANRS Network Operators Program and the MANRS program initiative itself. On the way, as we developed, as I mentioned as well, we introduced new programs, IXP program, CDN Cloud program, Network Equipment program. And as we evolved, more and more formalization was happening in the community. 9 operators is not the community, but by the time we launched the Network Equipment Vendor program, there were already 1,000 participants. And it was a community, and we called this MANRS community. At that time, we didn't distinguish between the MANRS participants and MANRS community. They were all the same. We introduced the steering committee. We introduced the charter for the community. So this effort has more transparency, has more formal requirements, they're more pronounced, how the MANRS initiative operates. And at the time, Internet Society operated as the secretariat of this initiative. And then in 2024, it was transitioned to Global Cyber Alliance. And then in 2025, we introduced the MANRS development process. And by thinking through development process, it also called for new changes in the MANRS ecosystem. Because the MANRS actions, the documents that MANRS developed, cannot be just outcome of the MANRS participants from a small group. they should be the outcome of global consensus. So the community that is involved in developing those actions should be really global. It should go well beyond and above just MANRS participants. And you see this change. The MANRS community, that's any network, any party that is interested in routing security and interested in MANRS is part of this community. It's really open. It doesn't have any requirements. And like in other, standard setting bodies like IETF, anyone can contribute their expertise to the development of these documents. The MANRS participants is the more formally defined group. You need to meet the requirements and need to demonstrate your commitment to become a MANRS participant. And yeah, we have working groups now. They're more formally defined, how they participate in developing, updating those documents. We have steering committee, and Global Cyber Alliance now performs the function of the secretariat. So to reflect those changes, we ratified the new charter using this new MANRS development process. It was adopted by voting with a good turnout, I think, with 18%. Well, in communities like this, 18% is a good number. So very happy with the new charter that reflected all these changes in the MANRS ecosystem. Now, why to join MANRS? I want to come to this question once again. Well, there are a few reasons. First of all, it signals your security posture. As any certification program, and you can consider MANRS as a certification, a very soft certification and informal program, it helps you to signal your performance, right? Because otherwise, how people know that you have your backyard in order, you implement those controls? Well, they probably can measure, they can probably sort of implement MANRS Observatory, but MANRS gives this level of assurance that yes, and you can look at the scores in the measurement system and see to what extent they're committed to MANRS. Implementing those controls, in many cases, benefits the network itself because it reduces number of incidents, it streamlines the operations. Your customers, your BGP customers, if you have ones, will not become your transit providers if you implement those controls. Very important. And of course, it addresses many concerns of even policymakers about resilience, security, and how those issues are being addressed. It's important to say that MANRS is not the solution. There is no one solution in this area. It's really a sum of collective effort, and MANRS provides the base, provides the structure to guide and facilitate this community effort coming together in improving routing system. It's a stepping stone, but it's a very important one. So please take the first step. And well, let me summarize this why. So as I said, improve your own security posture. That's a clear business case for joining MANRS. That's a very simple baseline, non-contentious. It's not a best current practice. It's a baseline, but it helps to improve your own security and improve security of the routing system globally. Meet the expectations of operators community. I think those controls that I mentioned in MANRS are becoming a norm in your peering practices. So if someone is not implementing this, if someone causing trouble for the peering community in, let's say, internet exchange points or private interconnects, that's not acceptable. It becomes less and less acceptable in network operations. And you can use MANRS as a competitive differentiator. You can be part of this 1,200 as opposed to 77,000 networks that actually can demonstrate and not afraid of demonstrating their good practices and their goodwill and their good netizenship. And with this is my call, join us. I mean, it's very simple. You submit a form, we'll review the form, we'll ask questions, provide information in the form how you implement those actions. Please read the actions document as well. Don't just look at the titles, because the title is sometimes misleading. Participate. You don't have to be a MANRS member to become part of the governance structure of MANRS. So steering committee elections are at the end of this month, of October, sorry. I should have said that tomorrow. So at the end of October, and if you're interested, you can nominate yourself or someone else can nominate you. So please go to the MANRS website and look at the steering committee elections. And contact us if you have any questions. You can contact me here, I'm here this week, or you can approach and use the contact there. Right, and that's my last slide. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andre. Now we'll give the floor to Madhvi. And her presentation is the role of the technical community in Internet resource management.